Well, I just finished another series, so I guess that I gotta do a series wrap-up again. This time I finished the Shadow Fall series by C.C. Hunter. Yes, I did start off by doing Born at Midnight on YouTube and then completed the series on my Patreon. Here's what I thought. I just want to put out there that this was not the worst series that I've read. It wasn't amazing, but it also wasn't a miserable slog where I wanted to rage quit halfway through one of the books because I was struggling to understand what was going on through page after page, chapter after chapter of nonsense that has nothing to do with anything. That being said, I seem to recall remarking upon several occasions throughout Born at Midnight that the book kind of seemed to be moving from seemingly random thing to random thing, and then the ending sort of came out of nowhere, almost like the author herself suddenly remembered that the books needed to have endings. The rest of the series didn't remotely change in that aspect whatsoever. In fact, I think that it was at the end of the fourth book where they were hunting down the person who had killed Holiday's twin sister and another couple of girls. And as Kylie was struggling to figure out who done it, she was like, obviously it's this one guy because he's super sus. But then the book kind of did this really random last minute swerve and was like, no, wait, it's this other guy. And I read it and I was kind of all like, who is this guy? I have never heard of this guy before in my life. Also, as I'm thinking about it, didn't that happen with one of the Stalking Jack the Ripper books? I think that I have a knack for picking up young adult romances disguised as other genres who want to solve mysteries, but who also want makeouts, but who forget to actually write a mystery, so they pull some random, insanely minor background character out and say it was this guy, call it a day, and then proceed to write more makeouts. Speaking of makeouts, let's talk about the love triangle in Shadow Falls. So, in the first book, we get introduced to Lucas and Derek as possible love interests to Kylie. Lucas is a werewolf, and Derek was some kind of fairy hybrid, whatever. In the beginning, Kylie had this sort of maybe almost something with Derek, but she pushed him away in favor of hooking up with Lucas. Derek moped. He moved on and found another girlfriend, but then she was murdered, and then Derek immediately skipped over all thoughts of grief and immediately launched back into obsessing over Kylie, probably in ways that most people would not even consider adorable and call it for what it is, creepy, obsessive, to the point of almost being stalker-like. Derek constantly disrespected Kylie's boundaries even when she told him no. Kylie told Derek over and over that she was with Lucas now, and she didn't even want to be around Derek because she was with Lucas. However, he kept coming around insisting that he loved Kylie so much that he couldn't even stand to be apart from her for long, which, dude. However, the second that another pretty girl who showed a romantic interest in Derek, this bozo instantly went from Kylie, my love, to Kylie, never heard of her, which kind of makes me question exactly how much he loved Kylie in the first place. I'm going to call Derek bag number 1. Bag number 2 is Lucas. And Lucas. At first, Lucas wasn't so bad. I kind of felt like the only reason why he was with Kylie at all was simply because he once lived next door to her when they were children, and that somehow translated into them wanting to suck face now that they're teenagers. Say what you will about Derek, but I felt like he had more meaningful conversations with Kylie. I'm not sure that I can say the same about Lucas's relationship with Kylie. I think that most of their conversations revolved around how hot that the other was and how they wanted to be together. Which, if you've been following me for a while now, you should know that my opinion about these kinds of relationships that are purely based off of how hot that the other party is and not because you have shared hobbies is insanely low. These are not relationships that are going to stand the test of time. In fact, if you told me that Lucas and Kylie broke up in the first page of the spin-off series, I would 100% not be surprised at all. Now, I did say that in the beginning, Lucas wasn't so bad, which, wait for it, and Kylie caught Lucas in an engagement ceremony to another girl and watches as Lucas kisses this other girl. And there it is. Lucas kept insisting that Kylie just didn't understand that he was doing this because he was trying to make it so that all werewolves were not under the 1984-like dictatorship of the Werewolf Council, who dictates things like who they can even be with. And it's not like Kylie misunderstands what Lucas was trying to do. It's more like the fact that Lucas didn't tell Kylie about any of this. She heard it from Frederica and had to watch all of this with little to no warning. Naturally, Lucas tries to soothe this over by stating over and over how much he loves Kylie, usually at inappropriate times, like when he's teaching Kylie how to sword fight. Kylie, for her part, continued to resist him, even going so far as to say that love wasn't enough. And for the longest time, I was hoping that Kylie would end up with neither Lucas nor Derek. Team Kylie deserves better, am I right? However, at the end of the series, Kylie randomly decides that she does love Lucas and ends up with him anyway, which was so frustrating and made me want to scream. Even after all of the nonsense he put her through, all of the lying and disrespecting her boundaries, yes, just like Derek, and Kylie still chooses to become Lucas's girlfriend again. Overall, I felt like the writing style of this was simplistic. It was a breeze to read through these novels, and I think that that's a big part of why I found them so enjoyable. Nothing like the overly verbose Spirit Walker series, which struggled to find its own point, or Court of Thorns and Roses, which did not know how to shut up ever. That being said, I felt like Hunter often struggled with prioritizing things in her writing and letting the readers know just how urgent that certain matters were. For example, throughout the series, Kylie often had a lot of girl talks with Miranda, Della, and Holiday about various things that were troubling her, which there were many things, so these were frequent occurrences. But Kylie would offload about her current boy troubles in the exact same tone of voice that she'd used to discuss a madman who wanted to either marry her or murder her. These same topics would also be discussed in the span of a single page. And unlike with other books that constantly just dump all this info on you, at least you knew where the priority was. That was never in question. But when Kylie would go from whining about being stalked by a creepy Mario to whining about the latest dumb thing Lucas did to her, I kind of wanted to shake her and scream at her to get some freaking perspective. And Lord, give me patience with Kylie. She was just not the brightest bulb. In fact, if we're going to use the chandelier metaphor here, I'm going to go ahead and say that if Kylie is a chandelier, 90% of her bulbs are burned out. I can forgive Kylie constantly rushing in to save the day at the end of every book, because sometimes it just be like that. But at the end of the third book, she found out that she was a supernatural called a chameleon. And for the longest time, she was going around saying, "But I'm not a lizard." And at this point in the series, Kylie had already exhibited various traits of all of the other supernatural creatures. So when she found out exactly what she was, it was like, I mean, duh. But the problem was that she spent so much time walking around screaming about lizards, and I wanted to shake her over that too. A person being a chameleon isn't exactly rocket science, and for a girl who can seemingly change her supernatural abilities at will, for her to be a chameleon, it just made sense. But the book was just insanely hung up over this. I mean, what could it possibly mean? Not like the idea that I'm pretty sure a 5-year-old could have figured out. After finally coming to terms with what she was, Kylie eventually reconnected with her biological grandfather and his sister through the help of the spirit of her biological grandmother. Kylie left the camp for a while to live with them, only to find them living in this cult-like environment. Now, up until Kylie found the other chameleons, Lucas had been telling her about the overly controlling behaviors of the werewolves, how this council was disowning werewolves from marrying outside of approved relationships and excommunicating them if they dare to even think about marrying outside of the species. The chameleons were exceptionally similar to this, and I'm positive that this could have been an interesting subplot, a lot of metaphors about racism and modern-day politics. Instead, like everything else in the series, the subplot for both the chameleons as well as the werewolf committee were treated like an afterthought that had been shoved in at the last second. They were both wrapped up so quickly and pushed aside in favor of Kylie and Lucas making out some more. However, once you remove all of the padding, I felt like this was an interesting coming-of-age story that even had a halfway decent villain at the end. I'm not going to spoil the entire thing for you, but let's just say that it was actually built up across a couple of books, and unlike most of the endings, Kylie going to face the bad guys at the end of the series felt like something that the series had actually been building towards. That being said, the padding in the story still exists, and you have to slog through all of it in order to understand half of the points about Kylie's coming of age, as well as the build-up for the final showdown at the end. All in all, this could have been a pretty decent series if somebody had simply helped Hunter chop off most of the fat. Somebody to guide her and help her to understand that she just can't randomly shove things in that had no build-up to them. If you want somebody to help you chop off the fat and help guide your story to a better resolution, I offer both Booksnark editing services as well as traditional editing services. For just $3 per chapter, I will tell you how awful that your writing is. But not to worry if you feel like you can't take the criticism, I also offer regular book editing as well. $3 for every 5,000 words. You can contact me on any of my social media pages if you have further questions. Also, since I'm apparently advertising myself in this video, go buy some of my works on Amazon. I have a slew of short stories as well as one full-length novel. Regular Snark will continue as planned on Monday. Until I see you again.